Well, good morning. My name is Kevin, and I'm one of the youth volunteers here, so I'm here about every Wednesday night with the youth group. This morning, we're going to listen to a Bible story, and many times, Bible stories have characters that really, their personalities come out. And during this one, I want you to pay close attention to three characters that we'll talk about in just a little bit. You'll know who exactly they are as soon as you listen to the story.
In the Bible, there was a rich man named Nabal who was known for being rude. Nabal had a large flock of sheep and goats, and a wife named Abigail. Unlike Nabal, Abigail was known for being sweet.
Hi.
Not far from where Nabal and Abigail lived, King David and his men were camping. David needed some supplies, so he gathered some of his men to send to Nabal's house. He told them to greet Nabal with kind words, and Nabal should return their kindness. So the men went to Nabal, greeted him with nice words, and asked him for some supplies. But Nabal was nasty. Go away! He shouted insults at them and told them to leave. The men returned to David and told him the things that Nabal had said. David was furious. He told his men to grab their swords so they could get even with Nabal. Meanwhile, back at Nabal's farm, Abigail heard how poorly Nabal treated David's men.
Oh, no.
She knew her husband's bad attitude could mean trouble for them. So she gathered food and supplies and loaded them up on donkeys. David and his men stormed through the desert, ready to get revenge on Nabal. Suddenly, they saw someone approaching. It was Abigail. Abigail bowed down to King David and begged him not to hurt Nabal. She asked David to stop and think before he acted out of his anger. David took a deep breath and thanked God for sending Abigail to calm him down. David accepted Abigail's gift of supplies and went home, instead of doing something he might regret later on.
Hooray!
Because Abigail asked him to think about forgiveness, David chose peace instead of anger.
It comes from 1 Samuel. And what happens is King David and his men are traveling through the desert, and they decide that they needed some more supplies. So back in that day, it was custom that if you went to someone's house and you asked for some supplies or some help, somebody gave that to you. So what David did was sent some of his men over to a man named Nabal's house. Now, Nabal was very rude. He was probably the most rude person I've seen in the Bible. In fact, he had met David before, but he comes right out and he goes, I don't even know who David is. And so David's men went back and told David this. Well, David got pretty angry. This was the king. And so what David did was he told his men to get their swords ready, and he was going to go take revenge out on Nabal. Now, Nabal had a wife who was very, very nice. And I'm really not sure why she stayed with Nabal, but she did. Probably because back then you had to stay with your husband no matter what. And what Abigail did, that was her name, Abigail put together a bunch of supplies, and she rode out and took the supplies on donkeys and met David's men as they were coming to probably do a lot of harm to Nabal and the family. So she got down on her knees and she bowed down and she asked David to reconsider. And David did. He repented and he thanked God for bringing Abigail to him so he didn't cause harm to somebody else's family. Now, there's three people that we can talk about in the story, right? We can talk about Nabal, who was very rude and probably will never change his ways. We can talk about David, who was trying to do the right thing and then was going to seek revenge on somebody for not doing what he wanted. And then we can talk about Abigail. Who was Abigail in this story? What was her role? She was a peacemaker, wasn't she? She actually rode out and stopped David's men. She caused peace. So I want you to think about your lives. What roles do you play? Are you like Nabal sometimes? I know I'm like Nabal sometimes. Sometimes, no matter what, I think I'm right, and I'm not going to change my way. Other times, I'm like David, and I want to get revenge. And sometimes, and probably I should be more times, like Abigail, and seek to be the person who wants to cause peace between people instead of harm. So this week, let's really try to be like Abigail in everything. You may have friends or brothers and sisters that, you fight with, you argue with. Well, don't do that this week. Try to be Abigail and try to be the peacemaker.